All right, welcome back. So as we reach our final week with Braiding Sweetgrass, I want us to take a moment and just reflect on the connections between what we've read and the larger themes of writing and information literacy. And so as writers, as researchers and scholars, one of the most important decisions that we make is choosing which information to engage with and how we use it in our work. So information literacy, which is in the title of this course, it's not just about finding sources, right? It's about discerning which information is reliable and credible and appropriate for the task at hand. So in a world saturated with data and opinions and arguments, mastering the art of information literacy means becoming more intentional about the ideas that we allow into our writing, our thinking, and our lives. So at its core, information literacy is about choice, right? When we write, we're not simply repeating what has already been said. We're entering into a conversation. And just like any conversation, who we choose to listen to matters, right? Think of it this way. In a room full of voices, which ones are you going to pay attention to, right? Who gets to shape your perspective? And that's a powerful act of selection. So in research, this translates to carefully considering who you cite, what perspectives you foreground, right? What framework you use, and what ideas that you are challenging or accepting, right? The sources that you choose to engage with are the building blocks of your argument. So they have to be chosen with care and intention. Being information literate isn't just about selecting sources that agree with your point of view. It also involves seeking out diverse perspectives, right? Weighing evidence from multiple angles and being open to changing your mind based on what you discover, right? I'm sure you've heard it online. Normalize changing your mind, right? We do the best with what we know, but once we know more, we're allowed to change our mind, and that's actually commendable, right? This process of critical engagement is key to producing thoughtful, rigorous work. So when we approach writing this way, we're not just regurgitating information that already exists. We're analyzing, we're synthesizing, and contributing to a broader conversation. So our goal is not just to find sources but to use them thoughtfully, asking ourselves, what voices are missing from this conversation? Or whose knowledge has been overlooked or marginalized in the process? So in practice, this means that information literacy involves more than just academic databases and peer-reviewed journals. So yeah, those are important, but so are stories and lived experiences and forms of knowledge that exist and have always existed and will always exist outside of traditional academic boundaries, right? So for example, Indigenous knowledge systems, personal narratives, and even creative expressions like poetry and art, they can offer valuable insights that challenge dominant perspectives that are typically upheld in academic settings. So the key is to think critically about the information at our disposal and consider how it fits into the larger framework of our work. So the chapters for this week, In the Footsteps of Nana Bozo, Old Growth Children, and The Sacred and the Superfund, they invite us to think about our relationship to the world around us and how that relationship shapes the stories that we tell and the information that we value and the ways that we write. So I'm going to read a quote from In the Footsteps of Nana Bozo. She writes, "But true to the circle of time, science and technology are starting to catch up with native science by adopting the Nana Bozo approach, looking to nature for models of design by the architects of biomimicry. By honoring the knowledge in the land and caring for its keepers, we start to become indigenous to place." So historically, Western academia, and really the Western world in general, has banished indigenous thought and language from scientific knowledge production, but also from the world, right? That was, Kimmerer tells us in this book, her ancestors' experience in these boarding schools that literally were meant to eradicate these knowledge systems and these languages. So native science didn't count I'm using air quotes, as science, right? It didn't count. So Kimmerer is reminding us of the ways that institutions of knowledge production have set us up to privilege some sources and voices and communities over others, right? Intentionally. And we must be critical of that, while also acknowledging the benefits of academia's commitment to filtering out unsubstantial information. So by looking to nature for models of design, as in the practice of biomimicry, Kimmerer argues that Western science is beginning to catch up to the wisdom that indigenous peoples have long held, right? Wisdom that has been marginalized and dismissed by academic institutions for centuries. And that brings us to an important aspect of information literacy, which is questioning whose knowledge is valued and whose is ignored, right? So historically, Western academia has privileged certain voices, particularly those aligned with Eurocentric, scientific, and colonial worldviews, while excluding indigenous thought and language and ways of being. Not just knowing, but also being. So native science, for example, has never been respected as relevant to modern knowledge systems. However, as Kimmerer points out, indigenous knowledge offers valuable insights into sustainability and ecology and the interconnectedness of life, right? Insights that are finally increasingly being recognized as essential to addressing today's environmental challenges. Not just beneficial, but essential, right? So this history of exclusion teaches us to be critical of the structures and the systems that determine which information is deemed credible and which is not, right? Information literacy then isn't just about finding the sources, right? I've said that. It's also about interrogating the power dynamics that shape our understanding of what constitutes reliable, quote, I'm using air quotes again, reliable information in the first place. By engaging with indigenous knowledge and other marginalized perspectives, we can challenge the dominant narratives that have long been accepted as the only truth, capital T truth. I talked about that in lecture 1 on this podcast. And at the same time, like I said, we also have to acknowledge that academia's commitment to rigorous standards and peer review does have its benefits, right? These processes help filter out misinformation and provides a framework for evaluating the credibility of sources. That being said, being information literate, right, having information literacy, means balancing this critical evaluation with an openness to knowledge systems that may not fit neatly within these academic frameworks. So Kimmerer's work encourages us to see the value in diverse ways of knowing and to approach our research and our writing with a sense of responsibility towards the communities and environments that we are engaging with. So by honoring indigenous knowledge and being critical of the structures that have historically excluded indigenous knowledge, we can become more thoughtful, ethical, and informed writers. So this perspective and this ability to select credible sources, but also question the broader systems that determine credibility and consider those voices that have been silenced or overlooked, that's a skill that is essential to information literacy. So in the old growth children section, Kimmerer reflects on the lessons that we can learn from old growth forests, both ecologically and culturally. So she compares modern industrial practices like forestry, resource extraction, and urban sprawl, for example, to invasive species that consume land and simplify ecosystems, much like the salmonberry thickets that she talks about. So these practices, driven by a relentless demand for growth and consumption, they mirror the ways in which society has replaced old growth ecosystems with what she calls opportunistic culture, right? So this type of culture, like pioneer plant communities, may play a role in the early stages of regeneration, but it's not sustainable over a larger period of time. So Kimmerer emphasizes that when these pioneer communities reach the limits of easy energy, the only way forward is through balance and renewal, right? And this is where old growth systems offer a powerful model. So in old growth forests, resources aren't wasted, and the entire system operates with an efficiency that ensures long-term sustainability. So the layered canopy of foliage optimizes solar energy capture, making it a green architecture, she says, that we could learn from. And this reciprocal relationship within the forest, where early and late successional systems support one another, serves as a blueprint for self-sustaining communities. So Kimmerer suggests that if we are searching for models of resilience and sustainability, we only need to look at these forests and the cultures that have lived in harmony with them, right? So old growth cultures, much like the old growth forests, operated on principles of reciprocity and balance and renewal, rather than that unchecked consumption and growth and insatiability, right? So for us as writers and as thinkers, Kimmerer's insights offer a crucial reminder. In our pursuit of knowledge, we should be wary of the opportunistic culture that prizes short-term gains over long-term sustainability. So information literacy, like ecological literacy, requires us to recognize the value of diverse perspectives and the necessity of long-term thinking and the importance of sustainability in the stories that we tell and the information that we're engaging with. And so by embracing these lessons, we can move beyond a narrow, extractive approach to writing and research, and instead cultivate practices that are more attuned to balance and reciprocity and respect for the complexity of these systems, both natural and intellectual, that we inhabit. So France is a character mentioned in the Old Growth Children chapter of Braiding Sweetgrass, and he's an old logger who worked in the Pacific Northwest, and he represents a traditional view of forestry, which is deeply connected to the work of cutting down trees in old growth forests. So despite his role in the logging industry, France also holds a profound reverence for the old growth forests. So he understands the beauty and the complexity and the irreplaceable value of these ecosystems, even as his livelihood depended on their destruction. So Kimmerer uses France to illustrate this paradox that many people face when their economic survival is tied to practices that are unsustainable or harmful to the environment, right? France embodies this tension between respecting nature and participating in industries that harm it, right? His story reminds us that even those who work within systems of exploitation can have a deep sense of appreciation for the natural world, and that this appreciation can inspire reflection on how we might do things differently, right? France's character helps Kimmerer convey the idea that true sustainability requires a shift in how we value and interact with the land, not just seeing it as a resource to be exploited, but as a teacher and a partner in the work of renewal. So France's reflection in Old Growth Children provides a compelling metaphor for this rethinking. Okay, he says, this is a quote, "This was an exercise in personal forestry, but it was also an exercise in the creation of personal art. I could not reconcile myself to the title of forester, but I could live with the idea that I am a writer who works in the forest and with the forest, a writer who practices the art of forestry and writes in trees." Okay, so this quote can be a guiding metaphor for our approach to information literacy. So just as France views forestry as both a scientific and artistic practice, we can view our research and our writing as not just technical exercises, but as creative and reflective acts. So information literacy is about more than just finding and citing these sources. It's about engaging with these ideas in a way that is thoughtful and imaginative and deeply connected to the world around us. So this is another dichotomy that Kimmerer is committed to breaking down, and that's the dichotomy between art and science, right? France challenges this traditional boundary between art and science, suggesting that proficiency in the arts, so like creativity, intuition, and emotional connection, might be what's missing in conventional forestry practices. So similarly, in our academic work, we often separate creativity from critical thinking as if they belong to different realms or in different realms. But what if, like France, we considered our research as an art form, right? What if we approached the selection of sources and the construction of our arguments with the same care and creativity as a poet revising a poem? So by adopting this perspective, we can become more than just consumers of information. We become creators who thoughtfully select, interpret, and weave together knowledge in ways that are not only intellectually rigorous, but also artistically and ethically resonant. So France's view invites us to see our role as writers and as researchers as one that works with the material, whether that material is trees or texts, in a respectful manner, in a reciprocal manner. So as we continue to develop our skills in information literacy, I encourage you to think like an artist as well as a scholar, right? Consider how you might write with trees, so to speak, with the sources that you engage with, and craft your arguments with the same care that France uses in arranging his forest, right? And this approach won't just enhance the quality of your work, but it also aligns your work with those principles of reciprocity and sustainability that I think Kimmerer so beautifully articulates and advocates for. So in this final chapter that we're reading, The Sacred and the Superfund, Kimmerer vividly contrasts the sacred significance of Onondaga Lake for the Haudenosaunee with its current state as one of the most polluted sites in the United States. So the Onondaga Lake is more than just a body of water for the Haudenosaunee peoples. It is a sacred site. It is a sacred site where the great law of peace was established. But then we also see this lake turned into a Superfund site, right? Essentially a dumping ground for industrial waste. So how did we get here? And that is where capitalism and colonialism come into play. So capitalism, with its drive for profit and expansion, treats natural resources as mere commodities, right? These factories around Onondaga Lake were part of a capitalist system that saw the lake not as a sacred site, but as a place to discard chemical waste for the sake of economic gain. And this mindset reflects a core aspect of capitalism, which is prioritizing short-term profits over long-term sustainability and respect for the environment. We'll touch more on capitalism in a couple weeks when we read Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism, but I do think it's important for us to engage with it right now. And so the connection from capitalism to colonialism is that colonialism is not just about taking land. It's about imposing values and systems on people who had their own ways of interacting with their environment, imposing those systems onto them, right? Colonial logic paved the way for capitalism by setting up a system where indigenous relationships with the land were completely disregarded, right? Colonizers viewed the land as something to be exploited, and this mindset didn't just stop at the land, right? It evolved into capitalist practices that we see today. The way that we view the land and the way that we view labor today in our capitalist society is directly correlated to the systems that were set in place through colonial logics, okay? And here's the thing. Capitalist logic is essentially the evolution or an evolution of colonial logic. So colonialism created this framework where indigenous lands and peoples were seen as resources to be used, right? And capitalism took that framework and pushed it further in a different lens. It's about viewing everything through the lens of economic gain, often at the expense of environmental and cultural values. And the list goes on, like mental health, right, community, etc. So capitalism in many ways has built on the colonial belief that land and resources exist primarily for human exploitation rather than for their intrinsic value or the relationships that they support. So as we reflect on this, I want us to think about how that might impact our own research and writing, right? So just as Onondaga Lake was treated as this disposable resource because of colonial and capitalist views, information and sources can sometimes also be treated in a superficial way if we don't pay attention to their contexts, right? In our writing, we should be mindful about the sources that we choose, right, and their political alignment and the perspectives that they represent, right? Whose voices are they listening to? Whose voices are they not listening to, right? It's not just about finding this information. We have to understand where it comes from and who produced it and what interests are at play. So think of it like this. When Kimmerer talks about restoring the lake, she's not just talking about cleaning up the literal pollution, although that's part of it, but she's talking about rebuilding relationships with the lake and respecting the land's inherent significance, not its significance to humans, but its inherent significance to the earth, right, and its functions. So similarly, when we engage with our sources, we should aim to build a relationship with them. We should be recognizing their origins, right, and acknowledging the broader context that they are created in, and then integrating them into our work in a way that reflects and respects their complexity. So as we work with writing, I want us to consider how we can apply these principles, right? How can we engage with our sources in a way that honors their context and respects the diverse perspectives that they represent, right? And this approach will not only enrich our work, but it aligns our work with a more ethical and thoughtful practice of research. So by connecting these ideas, we can see how understanding the impact of colonialism and capitalism on our environment can also guide us in becoming more responsible and reflective researchers and writers. Okay, so as we wrap things up, I just want to address the elephant in the room, which is that I know that some of you are writing what you think I want to hear. I don't want that. Okay, I want you to think of it this way. If I handed you your own essay to read, how many of you would get past the first paragraph or even the first sentence? Because honestly, if your writing does not make you excited, why would it make literally anyone else excited, including me, right? I'm here because I love reading your work and I also get paid to do that, but I want to read your voice, not a version that is just trying to figure out what I want to read, right? It's very disingenuous. So here is my challenge to you. Stop guessing what I want to hear. Stop writing for this imagined audience of like, I don't know who you think I am, but I don't want to read that. I want you to start saying and writing what you really mean, what you really want to say, right? Be bold, be authentic, and let your own voice shine through, right? Your writing should be something that you would want to read, not just something that you think some teacher in some faraway place, and that teacher is me right now, but also in general, no one wants to read that. Because if it doesn't make you want to turn a page, why would it make me want to? Right? So go ahead, write with passion and honesty and pizzazz, and your unique perspective is what makes your work worth reading. So like for me personally, usually when I'm in some sort of creative process, whether it's writing or I'm a choreographer, so choreography or literally any creative process, sometimes there will just be an idea that is so loud and it just wants me, like it just gets louder, and like I'll try to push it to the side and because I dismiss it and I'm like, no, that's not good enough. Before I even engage with it, I'm like, no way. But those are the ideas that you should focus on. The ones that get louder, the more you ignore them. Just experiment with it, okay? That's what I want you to do this week. Experiment with your voice. Please don't make me read any more stuff that doesn't sound like a human, okay? And please no AI. So anyway, remember, the best writing is not about fitting some mold. It's about breaking that mold, actually, and creating something that's truly yours. And that is the real win, right? You don't need a grade to tell you that. but you will get a better grade. So anyway, have a great rest of the week. I'm excited to read this voice of yours, and I'll see you next time.